The day we moved into 1427, Sycamore Lane began long before the sun came up. It began 15 years earlier, when Elaine and I were newlyweds living in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat that smelled of bleach and dryer sheets. It began every time we sat down with the checkbook and moved money from vacation to house fund. Every birthday party held in a park because our living room was too small for more than 6 kids. Every Christmas when the kids asked why we never went anywhere, and we smiled and said, soon. It began with the first time I put on a police uniform at 26 and promised myself that one day my children would grow up in a house with a yard big enough for a swing set and a dog. It began with Elaine coming home from 36-hour shifts in the trauma bay, eyes bloodshot, still finding the energy to study real estate listings at 2 in the morning. So when the moving truck pulled up at 7:12 a.m. on the second Saturday in October, the air was cold enough to see our breath, the sugar maples were on fire with color, and every box felt like a decade of sacrifice finally coming home. Grace was the first one out of the car. 8 going on 18, braids flying. She sprinted up the front walk and threw her arms around the porch column like it was a long-lost relative. It's even prettier than the pictures, she yelled. Miles, 5 years old and convinced he was already a professional athlete, dropped his Spider-Man backpack in the grass and shouted, I call the room with the giant window, before he had even seen the inside. Elaine stood on the sidewalk in her favorite gray coat, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears already shining. I came up behind her, wrapped my arms around her waist, and rested my chin on her shoulder. Say it out loud, I whispered. She laughed through the tears. We own this house, James Carter. We really own it. Inside, the place smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Sunlight poured across the oak floors. The kids' footsteps echoed like music. We ate donuts on the kitchen island because the table was still wrapped in quilts in the truck. Grace claimed the bedroom with the window seat. Miles insisted his room needed to be blue, like the Dodgers. Elaine ran her fingers along the quartz countertop and whispered, I'm never leaving this kitchen. For 4 perfect hours we were just a family moving in. Neighbors waved from driveways. A retired couple down the street brought over a tin of homemade oatmeal raisin cookies and introduced themselves as the Ellisons. Tom Ellison shook my hand and said, Welcome to the street, James. You'll love it here. His wife Diane added, If you need anything, holler. It felt like every corny suburb movie we had ever watched, and we let ourselves believe it could be real. Then Margaret Whitcomb showed up. I noticed her first at 1:47 p.m. She was standing under the oak across the street, arms folded so tightly her white blazer was pulling at the seams. Platinum blonde hair and that perfect helmet bob, oversized sunglasses even though the sun was behind her, and the clipboard. Always the clipboard. Elaine saw her at the same moment. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We had seen that posture before, in college dorms, in nicer apartment complexes, in open houses where the realtor suddenly remembered another appointment. The posture that says, I am measuring whether you belong, and I have already decided you do not. I kept carrying boxes. Elaine kept directing traffic. We pretended we didn't notice the way Margaret's gaze tracked every movement, the way she typed something into her phone with sharp, angry thumbs. By 3:30 the movers were gone, and we were down to the personal stuff, photo albums, the kids' stuffed animals, the box marked James, Academy yearbooks, that still made me smile. I set it on the porch and stretched my back, and that was when Margaret crossed the street like a battleship cutting through calm water. Excuse me. Her voice cracked across the cul-de-sac like a starter pistol. Young man. I turned slowly. 44 years old, captain's bars on my dress uniform at the station, and still young man. Afternoon, ma'am. James Carter. My family and I just closed on this house yesterday. She stopped at the edge of our lawn, heels sinking into the grass we now paid taxes on. Margaret Whitcomb, president of the Oak Ridge Heights Homeowners Association. I have not been notified of any ownership transfer at this address. We have standards. I need to see your paperwork immediately. Elaine came down the steps carrying Miles's dinosaur blanket. The title company sent the notification letter on September 12th. I'm happy to forward the email. Margaret's eyes flicked over Elaine's scrubs, over the blanket, over the boxes, and finally over Grace and Miles watching wide-eyed from the doorway. That is not how things are done here, she said, each syllable sharpened to a point. Major sales require board review. We protect property values. We protect the character of this neighborhood. There it was. Character. Delivered the way some people say infestation. Grace's small voice floated out. Daddy, why is she mad at us? Margaret didn't even glance down. She was already pulling out her phone. I'm calling the police, she announced to the entire block, loud enough for every porch to hear. There are unauthorized individuals occupying a residence. Possible trespassing. Elaine's hand found my arm, nails digging in just enough to keep me grounded. James. I've got it, I said quietly. Margaret paced our front lawn like she owned it, phone to her ear, voice rising in pitch and volume with every step. Yes, operator, I need officers at 1427, Sycamore Lane immediately. There are suspicious persons who have forced entry into a home. I don't know if they're armed. Please hurry. Phones came out like weapons. Diane Ellison across the street had her hand over her mouth. Tom froze halfway to his pickup. Garrett Hayes, the 15-year-old from 2 doors down, leaned out his bedroom window with his iPhone in full view, red record light glowing steady. I stood on my own porch and watched a 62-year-old white woman call 911 on a black family for the crime of moving into the house we had scrimped and sacrificed 15 years to buy. Grace started crying. Miles buried his face in Elaine's scrubs. I knelt so I was eye level with them both. Listen to me, I said, voice steady even though my heart was trying to punch through my ribs. That lady is wrong. This is our house. Nobody can take it away from us. Daddy promises. Grace hiccuped. Is she going to make us leave? Never, I said, and I meant it with every cell in my body. Elaine took the kids inside. I stayed on the porch, hands open and visible, breathing the way they teach you at the academy when someone might be about to pull a weapon. Except this time the weapon was a telephone and 25 years of unchallenged entitlement. The first cruiser arrived at 3:58 p.m. Deputy Ryan Keller, 29, former Marine, still carried himself like he expected incoming fire. Margaret practically sprinted to meet him, clipboard raised like a battle standard. Officer, thank God. These people have no right to be in that house. I'm the HOA president, and I demand you remove them immediately. Ryan listened, nodded, took notes. Then he walked up the driveway toward me. I saw the exact second recognition hit him. His step faltered for half a heartbeat. 3 weeks ago I had stood in roll call and introduced myself as the new chief of police. He had shaken my hand and said, "Welcome aboard, sir." Now here we were. He stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Good afternoon, sir," he said, careful and professional. "We received a call about a possible trespass. May I see some identification and proof of ownership?" "Of course, deputy." I went inside, grabbed the thick manila folder I had left on the kitchen island for exactly this reason, and brought it back out. Deed, closing statement, settlement sheet, driver's licenses, property tax receipt, everything. Ryan reviewed it slowly, turning pages with the kind of deliberate care that told me he already knew how this ended. Margaret hovered behind him, practically vibrating. "Well," Ryan handed the folder back to me. "Everything appears in order, sir. You are the legal owners." He turned to Margaret. "Ma'am, there is no trespassing occurring here. These residents have full right to occupy this property." Her face went from red to purple. "That's impossible. The HOA regulations are civil matters," Ryan said, calm but firm. "They do not override property law, and they certainly do not justify a 911 call for suspected criminal activity when none exists." Margaret was not finished. She stepped closer, voice climbing an octave. "This neighborhood has a certain standard. I have every right to protect it. I want them gone." Ryan's hand moved to his radio. "Dispatch, this is Keller. Situation at 1427 Sycamore requires a supervisor. Possible false report." Margaret heard the words false report and finally paused, but only for a second. "You're going to regret this," she hissed at Ryan. "I know people downtown." Sergeant Laura Mitchell arrived at 4:07. She took one look at the circus, Margaret pacing and gesturing wildly, me standing quietly on my own porch, half the block filming, and put it together in about 5 seconds. Ryan briefed her in low tones. I caught fragments. Legal ownership recorded 911 call harassment of residence chief of police. Laura asked Margaret for identification. Standard procedure when someone files a report. Margaret sputtered but handed over her license. While Laura reviewed it, Ryan came back to the foot of the steps. "Chief Carter," he said quietly, respect thick in his voice. "I am so sorry your family had to deal with this." Margaret heard the word chief and went very, very still. Laura finished with the license and stepped forward. "Ma'am, filing a false police report is a misdemeanor in the state of Ohio. Based on the documentation of ownership, the recorded 911 call in which you claimed possible armed intruders, and multiple witness accounts, I have probable cause to believe you violated Ohio Revised Code 2917.32. I'm issuing a citation." Margaret's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You can't. He's one of yours." Laura didn't smile. "He's the chief of police, ma'am. And you just called 911 on him for moving into his own home." Garrett's voice floated down from the upstairs window. "Holy crap, this is going viral." Margaret tried one last desperate play. She turned to me, eyes suddenly glassy with crocodile tears. "Chief Carter, surely we can resolve this quietly. I didn't know who you were. I was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe." I stepped off the porch, close enough now that every phone on the block caught my words crystal clear. "Mrs. Wickham, you didn't need to know my title to treat my wife and children with basic human decency. You saw a black family moving into a house we worked 15 years to afford, and your very first instinct was to call the police. That's not protection. That's racism. And it stops today." I looked past her to the neighbors watching from their lawns. "My family belongs here. Not because a badge says so, but because we bought this house fair and square, same as every one of you. And no clipboard warrior gets to tell us otherwise." Then I turned to Ryan and Laura. "Officers, you've both handled this exactly by the book. Thank you." Ryan wrote the citation with the kind of careful handwriting they drill into you at the academy. Margaret took the paper with trembling fingers. The cruisers pulled away. The street went dead silent. Tom Ellison was the first to speak. "Margaret, there's an emergency HOA meeting tomorrow at 3. "You're finished," Diane added, voice shaking with anger. "And I'm seconding the motion." Sunday afternoon the community center was standing room only. 91 ballots. 87 votes to remove Margaret Whitcomb as president. She sat in the front row clutching her husband's hand, looking like someone had sucked the air out of her lungs. Their house went on the market 9 days later. Sold in 32, to a young Hispanic family with 2 little girls who brought us homemade tamales the day they moved in and asked if Grace could come play. That same Sunday neighbors we had never met showed up on our doorstep with casseroles, apology cards, and little kids clutching welcome drawings. Tom brought a bottle of Blanton's and said, James, we let her bully people for 25 years because it was easier than fighting. You and Elaine didn't let her bully you. We owe you. Diane Ellison brought her famous apple pie and tears in her eyes. I should have said something years ago when she went after the Patel family. I'm ashamed I stayed quiet. Your children are beautiful. Welcome home. Garrett Hayes and his mom brought a tray of Korean fried chicken and an apology for every time Margaret had questioned why their family had so many people living in one house. Garrett handed me his phone. 18 million views and climbing, Chief. Comment sections are wild. People are sharing their own stories. You gave a lot of folks courage. By the following summer, Grace was on the swim team, beating half the boys in freestyle. Miles had a permanent position at shortstop in the neighborhood wiffle ball league and a best friend named Noah who lived 3 doors down. Elaine planted herbs along the back fence and turned our kitchen into something that smelled like Sunday dinner every night. Margaret's court date came in February. She pleaded no contest, paid the maximum fine, did 80 hours of community service picking up trash along I-270 in an orange vest. We never saw her again. One warm July night in 2025, Tom fired up his massive grill for the annual block party. This year, officially, the Carter Welcome Barbecue, only 2 years late. 63 people filled our backyard. Kids ran wild with sparklers. Someone brought a karaoke machine and butchered Sweet Caroline until the whole street was singing. Elaine and I sat on the porch swing with glasses of iced tea and watched Grace teach Garrett's little sister how to do a cartwheel on the grass. Tom raised his beer in our direction. To the Carters, he shouted, who taught us that decent neighbors don't let bullies win. Everyone cheered. Later, when the kids were finally asleep and the last guest had gone home, Elaine and I stood in the quiet kitchen, moonlight coming through the window over the sink. We made it, she said softly. I slipped my arms around her waist from behind and rested my chin on her shoulder, same as I had the first day. We really did. From the darkest, ugliest moving day any family should ever have to endure, we built the kind of home people write songs about. Not because it was easy, but because we refused to let hate write the last chapter. That is the whole story, every raw, painful, triumphant minute of it. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been told, subtly or straight to your face, that you didn't belong somewhere you had every legal and moral right to be? How did you respond? When is it right to stand your ground until the ground shakes? And when is it wiser to walk away and preserve your peace? Where do you personally draw the line between civility and letting injustice keep winning? Drop your thoughts below. Speak plainly, speak honestly, and speak respectfully. These stories still need telling, and these conversations still need having.